Have you ever noticed that life doesn't just ask us once to start over? Sometimes we go through huge transition and we survive it. We rebuild our footing, we create a life that finally works, and then life changes again. And the strange thing is that the second beginning doesn't feel anything like the first one. I've been thinking a lot about this lately because when I first started over, my focus was very different than it is today. Back then, I was trying to rebuild. Now I'm asking a different set of questions altogether. When my life changed, I was focused on survival, not dramatic survival, just the practical and emotional kind. I needed to figure out who I was. I needed to make decisions on my own. I needed to build confidence again, and I needed to learn how to trust myself. Honestly, I needed to prove to myself that I could create a life that worked. Many of you have done the same thing. Maybe after a divorce, maybe after losing someone, maybe after retirement, or after a move, maybe after a chapter closed that you never expected to end. The details are different, but the work is often similar. You rebuild, you recover, you learn, you adapt, and eventually you find your footing. What surprised me is what happened after that. Once I built a life that worked, the questions started to change. The goal wasn't survival anymore. The goal wasn't proving that I could do it on my own. The goal wasn't rebuilding confidence. I'd already done that work. Instead, I found myself asking things like, well, what do I do now? What am I still curious about? What kind of future do I want to create? What should I do with all the ideas I've been carrying around? And perhaps most surprisingly at all, what happens when life changes again? One thing I've learned is that independence changes us, not just practically, but also personally, emotionally. When you've spent years learning how to make your own decisions, create your own routines, and build a life that fits you, something changes inside, something shifts. You become more comfortable with yourself, more capable, more selective. And maybe that's why starting again feels different. Because once I'd built a life that fit me, I no longer was looking to be rescued. Yeah, I was looking for something else, something that complemented my life rather than replacing my life, something that added to what I already built. Lately, I realized that the challenge isn't rebuilding anymore. The challenge is remaining open and remaining curious, open and curious to new ideas, new possibilities, even new relationships, open to learning things that weren't even on my radar a few years ago. And most of all, open to opportunities that don't look anything like the plans I once had. And I think that's a very different kind of courage. The courage to rebuild is one thing. The courage to stay open and curious after you've rebuilt is something else entirely. I've also been wondering whether different chapters require different strengths. The chapter that helped me start over required resilience and determination, patience and persistence. But this chapter seems to be asking for curiosity and adaptability and creativity, a willingness to experiment, and a willingness to say, I don't know, but let's find out. And honestly, I think that's one reason you've been hearing me talk about some different things lately, like relationships and AI and writing and creative projects, new possibilities. Not because I've abandoned the earlier journey, but because this chapter is asking different questions. And I'm curious where those questions might. Maybe the goal isn't to become a completely different person every time life changes. Maybe the goal is to keep becoming a fuller version of who we've already become, to carry the wisdom from one chapter into the next, to remain curious, to remain open, and to keep building a life that feels meaningful in the season that we're in now. I'd love to hear from you. Has life ever surprised you with a second or a third beginning? Were the questions different than you expected? Let me know in the comments. And until next time, let's keep building our next chapters with brains, heart, and curiosity. As always, bye for now.